Okay. I can't hear you.
There, can you hear me now?
Yep, hear you now. How do I sound?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to One-on-One with H1, an industry webinar series. Today's topic is revolutionary revenue, rethinking commercial team success within medical device. Today's event will be recorded and available on demand at www.h1.co. We'd like to ask any questions be held until the end of the presentation or dropped in the chat during the event. I'd like to introduce our speaker, Anatoly Geyfman. Anatoly has dedicated his life, like H1, to creating a healthier future. As the VP of Medical Devices, his mission is to grow H1's products for commercializing healthcare innovations. Prior to H1, Anatoly was the founder and CEO of Clairvoyance, where he led the team to build and commercialize an analytics platform for medical technology companies. Clairvoyance was acquired by H1 in 2021. Prior to Clairvoyance, Anatoly was the chief architect at Amber Health, where he built the first cloud-based platform for exchanging medical imaging studies between physicians, hospitals, and patients. I'm going to hand it over to you, Anatoly.
Oh, thanks so much, Elizabeth. Really appreciate it. And welcome to our webinar series. Today, we're going to be talking about revolutionary revenue, rethinking commercial team success within medical devices. Specifically, we're going to be talking about territory alignment as it relates to medical technology companies. Let me share my screen and let's get started. Perfect. Great. So a little bit about me. Elizabeth, thanks so much for the introduction. My name is Anatoly, and I lead our medical devices business here at H1. So today we're going to be talking about territory alignment. We're going to talk about what territory alignment is, some ideas about what dimensions to use when you're aligning territories for your team, the interplay between go-to-market strategies and territory alignment, and finally, some case studies and some ideas about how to design balanced and data-driven territories for your team. Let's get into it. So this is a quote I found about territory alignments from Harvard Business Review. And the idea here is many of us are working with territories that are not optimally aligned or not optimized for the opportunity that there is inside of them. And so just a simple territory design, even taking in fewer variables than we're going to take in today, can increase revenue by 2 to 7%. So there's a lot of value that's being left on the table with static or stale or incorrect territories for the opportunity that your company is going after. And so today we're going to talk about how we can maybe think about it and hopefully fix it. So what is territory alignment? Territory alignment is the idea of optimization of territories that your sales representatives sell and service customers inside of. The point of territory alignment is to support your sales strategy. For example, if you're selling to hospitals, you would have one type of territory alignment based on where the hospitals are located, or medical centers, academic medical centers versus community hospitals. But if you're selling to ambulatory surgery centers, that alignment may be totally different. The point of territory alignment is also to prioritize your most productive accounts. So if you are selling into community hospitals, you want to understand where the community hospitals are located, but also what's the catchment area of these hospitals? Are they surrounded by academic medical centers that may be taking those patients and the patients are going to those academic medical centers, or are the patients staying in the community? And so aligning your territory around those facts. You also want to make sure you balance opportunity and workload. In medtech especially, many of the sales reps are also in surgeries. And so having a territory that's full of opportunity but doesn't allow you enough time to cover surgeries may not be an optimal territory plan for your company. Vice versa, if you have a team that's separated into clinical folks and sales folks, then maybe you do want to prioritize opportunity for those folks and maybe have a separate alignment for the clinical folks. So there's lots of ways to kind of think about this particular component. Of course, salespeople worry and care and are really concerned about quota achievement. And so we want to make sure that we take that into consideration. If we're setting a quota for our territory to be a certain amount, we need to make sure that the opportunity inside of that territory supports that level of quota. And so understanding procedural volumes, understanding where patients are getting those treatments is going to be very important to understand how to set quotas for those territories. And of course, we want to make sure that we respond to market trends. Back to the hospital versus ambulatory surgery center example, 5-10 years ago, many medtech companies did not sell into ambulatory surgery centers. And now they do, because the procedures are starting to shift into those care settings. And so we have to make sure that we're accounting for those procedural shifts as we think about our territory alignment. The image here is actually a real example for territory alignment that we created for a medical capital equipment company that represents 20 territories that they wanted to represent. And you can see how we've divided the country up into those 20 territories. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those borders are for each territory and what they represent. Cool. So we talked a little bit about the dimensionality of territory alignment. Here's some things that you might want to think about. The first is balance. We want to make sure that territory alignments are balanced between territories. In other words, that if you have a quota, that quota is achievable by all members of your team. And it's fairly fair between each member. So you'll never get to full fairness because the United States is just not divided that way from a procedural volume and who performs those services. However, you can understand where folks are who are treating these patients. You can understand how many patients they're treating in each place, and you can design territories for fairness, at least within some threshold. Another dimension you might want to think about is geographical compactness and continuity. So the idea here is you want to design your territories around where your current sales team is located. You want to take into account travel distance, and you want to take into account retention of as much previous story as possible, while still creating, carving out opportunity for expansion. And again, go-to-market strategy, right? So if you're going after hospitals, your territory is going to be different than your territory is going to be if you go after ambulatory surgery centers or office-based labs or any other care setting. So very important to understand where your cases are performed, who is performing them, and optimizing territory around those elements. And again, existing account coverage versus new account acquisition. So we want to understand if clinical folks are going to be involved, how they're going to be involved. If there are no clinical folks and sales reps are responsible for clinical responsibilities, then we need to balance new accounts versus existing accounts. And so taking into consideration where your existing customers are and how they're distributed across the United States. Here's an interesting use case about the way that care is shifting in the United States. Here we're focusing on orthopedic care, specifically, I believe, total hip arthroplasty, so total hip replacements. We're seeing a significant shift of procedures, orthopedic procedures, into the ambulatory surgery care setting. While total hip arthroscopy is still performed in the inpatient setting for the vast majority of the time, partial knee and total knee replacements are starting to shift into those ambulatory surgery centers, especially with partial knees primarily performed in ambulatory surgery centers. So as you plan for these alignments, for these new territories, you really should take into consideration, where's the reimbursement going? Is the reimbursement heading towards the inpatient setting? Is it heading towards the outpatient setting, attached hospital outpatient setting, or is it heading towards these standalone ambulatory surgery centers? If you're not selling into hospitals or ambulatory surgery centers at all, if you're selling maybe potentially into skilled nursing facilities or offices. And you have to understand who's performing those cases where. Are they splitting time between multiple locations? How are we going to take into these multiple addresses into account? Cool. So going through how go-to-market strategies align with territory creation, we have to think about a few things. One is care settings. Again, this example comes up a whole lot, but only because it's really important. Especially during the COVID pandemic, we've seen a significant shift of a number of service lines into the ambulatory surgery setting. So if your territories were set before the pandemic, after the pandemic, those territories should probably be reevaluated. We're seeing a huge shift for orthopedics. We're also seeing a huge shift for other types of neurological treatments like spine fusions and pain management treatments. And so it's really important to consider where the cases are performed today. Second is physician preference and value analysis committee participation in the decision to purchase your products. So who are the buyers and who are the influencers? Mapping out the organizations where you've got physician preference items, you've got physician preference as an available way of buying your equipment versus value analysis committee may prioritize some areas versus others or some accounts versus others. That's important to consider, especially if you're, let's say, a new device and you're trying to win market share. Going through the value analysis committee may be a long way to get there. Maybe going after those smaller accounts, but that have physician preference as a key consideration for the purchase may be the way to go. Market trends, not just about the shifting into less acute care settings, but also, are there new vendors on the market? Is there a mind share shift? Are folks choosing less interventional techniques that take a little bit less time to perform versus your technique? And if so, identifying those accounts, identifying where the mind share is shifting, and then on the marketing side, really trying to create positioning against those new products and techniques. And the last one is existing install base and competition. Are you focusing your sale on the existence of another technology or another technique to perform a surgery? If so, you're better off looking at that technique versus the adjunct product. Are you replacing someone? Are you replacing a technique or a technology? And then that's a consideration as well. Looking at that may be really important for you to think about what's the right go-to-market strategy and what's the right territory alignment to support that strategy. The screenshot here shows you an alignment that we did for, it's the same alignment that you saw earlier, but this time we're zooming into a specific area, Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and we're seeing that the territory itself contains 14,000 overall procedures, with Sioux Falls having 805 procedures. So having this level of granularity may be really helpful to understand exactly where you should be focusing your efforts, even across your individual territories. This is for a specific set of procedures. The procedures are blinded, but you can imagine that this could support any type of procedure and any type of territory distribution or territory separation. Cool. So now we're going to get into the actual creation of these territories. At Clairvoyance and now at H1, we've built lots of tools to create territories for our customers. This is one of the latest tools that we've created. We call it Clairvoyance Align. And Clairvoyance Align is a tool to actually draw and measure territories in real time. So what feeds into this tool is a geospatial analysis of facilities and physicians that are performing your services. So the idea there is we want to create a territory that balances the quantity of patients that are appropriate for your services and the size of the territory that a single sales rep can support. Here we're looking at major hip and knee replacements, DRG 469, and we're comparing an old territory versus a new territory. And you can see that we're actually showing you the over and under for each of the territories as you're considering moving from one to another. With a data-driven analysis of patients and claims, we can get a fairly complete picture as to not only the number of patients that are represented in this territory, but also the number of physicians and facilities where those patients are treated. And that's actually really germane. The way the United States is distributed in terms of hospitals and physicians, really coastal cities contain the vast majority of facilities. And so once you draw those territories, the question remains, like, how would you distribute your team across the Midwest and the Northwest and so on? And understanding how the physicians and where the physicians work and which facilities they work at and which facilities are the ones that are dominant in an area, which community hospitals feed into those facilities is really important to create a territory plan that actually works for your team, especially for folks that represent the Midwest and central United States. Most importantly are these two bottom points, and that's we have to calibrate these territories not just with software, but also with input from sales, leadership, and marketing. At the end of the day, real people are going to work in these territories, and these territory alignments really need to be collaborative, not just for the initial creation, but also for the adoption of these territories. The sales team needs to get on board about why their territories are changing. Even if their territory changes are minor, there's still going to be questions about it. We think that this type of tooling is really helpful because it's a data-driven tooling, right? So we can see exactly what the size of the territories is. We can see the methodology behind how the territory is designed. And we can show different changes between old territories and new territories. And I think that's really important from a change management point of view. I wanted to present this case study. This is a national territory alignment for a real medical technology and services company. The brief here was to create 70 territories, balancing their current business and new business opportunities. So I'll walk you through this in a step-by-step way, and I think it'll be helpful to understand how this could be helpful to your team. So the first thing that we would do is, or the first thing that we did here is collect the data. Because we're balancing existing accounts and new business opportunities, we need to tag facilities, physicians in our application that are generating these territory alignments for which ones are current customers and which ones are opportunities. So the precursor to this alignment is really a data reconciliation project where we match your accounts in, or this company's accounts in their CRM to accounts in Clairvoyance. So then we can start identifying volumes for those accounts that you already have as your customers and those accounts that you don't. So collecting the data is key. The second one is create a solid methodology. So in this case, we had a few dimensions that we were balancing. The first was rep location. So we didn't want the reps to travel too far to get to their business. The second is team size. This happens to be a 70 sales rep territory alignment. The previous one you saw was a 20 rep alignment. These different alignments are meaningfully different in terms of the computation that you need to do to create them. You know, obviously balancing 70 units is much harder and takes a lot longer than balancing 20 units, but also the geography that you use to balance those units may need to change. I mentioned it earlier. What are these shapes? So in this particular alignment, the shapes that you're seeing are called hospital referral regions. A hospital referral region is a geographic unit that was developed by the Dartmouth Atlas of Healthcare, which is a research project to identify where care and gets performed in the United States and the costs of that care. So in that project, they've identified 306 territories or geographies where the majority of tertiary care for cardiovascular and neurological surgeries gets performed. We use this geography type quite a lot at Clairvoyance because it has a few really nice properties. The first property is that, and you'll see it right there, unlike metropolitan statistical areas, so large cities, hospital referral regions cover the whole United States. So they cover both the large cities, but also the rural areas, which is a really key consideration as you think about community hospitals and other underserved areas. The second thing is there are many of them, 306 of them, but not too many that you're going to have a lot of travel between them. So in other words, they're fairly compact, but there's still many enough of them that you can create robust territories out of them. And then, you know, the third thing that we really like about these hospital referral regions is that they align better to healthcare. Metropolitan statistical areas align to where people live. Counties align to administrative boundaries, which aren't really helpful for healthcare. And if you think about it, Kansas City, Kansas versus Kansas City, Missouri. Two different counties, but really one city. Hospital referral regions really align to where healthcare gets performed in the United States, which really helps us to create robust territories at home. Of course, this is not the only healthcare geography that we have at our disposal. There are other geographies that we've used in the past that help us align even bigger teams to the opportunity. For example, hospital service areas, which is a measure that's which is derived from Medicare data sets, also help us align territories at a much more fine-grained detail. There are 3,000 of them in the United States. So, you know, choosing the right geography is really important. Team size, of course, 70 here. We have to understand the current book of business and evaluate that current book of business. So not just in the number of physicians or facilities, but also on the volume that those physicians represent to your business. And of course, the opportunity for each account that is not your customer. Taking all of that into an algorithm, we can create a methodology around how do we score each territory? How do we score each territory across all of these dimensions? And then how do we align these territories to the reps that will be representing them within, that hopefully live within each territory? The next thing we did is generate the draft alignment and get feedback. So the key here is setting the right expectations. This is not gospel. This is just programmatic output from a tool that we wrote with the right methodology, hopefully, that we've selected to run this analysis. At the end of the day, people have to be in these territories. And so we have to understand which of these territories can stay, which of them need to change, how do they need to change. And that's really the reason that we created the Clairvoyance Align product as well, so that we can take this territory map, we can put it into Clairvoyance Align, and then we can distribute the responsibility for realigning within each of the regions in the United States to the folks that represent the company in those regions. So collaborative territory alignment is really what the vision for our product suite is. And then the last thing, of course, is managing change. Territories will invariably change from year to year, but especially through fairly cataclysmic events like the pandemic. The way that healthcare gets performed in the United States has changed quite a bit. And so territories will have to accommodate those changes. Not everyone is going to be happy, but the key is to have a solid methodology, a solid process, and a collaborative approach to it so that folks can understand why decisions were made as opposed to having them be made in an opaque way. I wanted to show you a little bit about our suite in general and how we support sales teams other than territory alignment. So what you're looking at are a sampling of our reports from our product called Omniscience. So the idea behind Omniscience is understand your market at a very high level detail, but also be able to go very, very granularly into each physician and facility and practice, view national trends, understand competition and market share, size and segment opportunities, just like we did with the territories, and then enable your team with these high quality reports that are generated dynamically from our application. The idea here is your sales operations team doesn't have to create these reports manually. They don't have to maintain a Tableau or a Power BI system where they every quarter dump data into it and then have to figure out where the problems lie. We've already created a lot of the capabilities to load data into the system and make sense of it, analyze the data, and produce these reports on the fly. And so the way that we generally work with companies, sales operations teams especially, is to help them service their sales organizations in a self-service way. In other words, get the man out of the middle, but instead have that person, the sales operations function and the marketing function, really focus on higher level goals, carving out new opportunities for folks, understanding market trends, and then aligning the sales force to those opportunities. Another product that we have in our suite is Territory Manager. And Territory Manager and the alignment capability actually work hand in hand. Territory Manager is where the aligned territories, the geographies themselves, get input to service the sales folks that use this product. So here you can see it's an instance of Territory Manager for pain management. And we have a San Antonio and Austin territory carved out already. So the sales reps doesn't see anything outside of those territories. And they see the full Rolodex of folks that represent their business inside of the territory. Some of them are even going to be tagged as existing customers. So a seller can really quickly go through and identify opportunities, identify competition, identify existing customers. And then we have some workflows inside of this application to enable them to go through and use this application quickly to get to the right information they need to have the next conversation with a physician that they're scheduled to talk with. We also have included referral analytics into this tool to understand the flow of patients in each territory. And of course, our reporting capabilities are fully built into Territory Manager. So if you've got something like this in front of you, you can generate reports, share them with your physician, help them understand where the market is going for your service or device. I'm going to close it out with a marketing outreach case study. This is for a capital equipment customer. We've helped this customer with targeting, prioritization of accounts, assigning those accounts, and creating engagement materials. We've sent out 91 customized physician reports during an 8-week campaign to a number of physicians that matched the criteria of our customer. We had a 20% meeting acceptance rate from this campaign. So in other words, out of those 91 customized physician reports that were sent out, 20% of those recipients accepted a meeting with our company. We also cleaned up their CRM provider directory. So many of our customers maintain, all of our customers really, that use sales tools like customer relation management tools like Salesforce.com have physicians and facilities already loaded up into those systems. But we see that the quality of those directories were woefully bad. Old data, incorrect addresses, incorrect phone numbers, no emails, incorrect administrators. So part of our process here was to reduce the error rates and improve the quality of the data inside of that system. And so we did that from 33.4% to 0.8%. 0.8%. And the way that we measured it is by looking at our data, doing spot checking against internet sources, and actually like hand verifying some of these providers to make sure that the accuracy was correct. And we estimate that we saved 150 hours on administrative tasks and manual content creation. This is especially true for these cleanup exercises where inordinate amount of time goes into cleaning up this data. And other than manual research, that's really the only way to get to some of this information is either manual research or rely on companies like Clairvoyance and H1 to really collect this data at scale and help customers clean their data and make sure that their data is optimized for success. A little bit about us. We work with a variety of medical device companies, some of the biggest names in the industry, but also some smaller names. We also, as H1, work with pharmaceutical companies, academic medical institutions, and payers. So we really try to cover the gamut of life sciences and healthcare organizations in the United States and abroad. So we're international, our data is international. Clairvoyance currently operates only in the United States. We have other products around the country. Some ideas about how we work with companies right now. I'll pause right here. Are there any questions? Anything you'd like to dive deeper into?
Great, thanks, Anatoly. So that concludes our webinar. If you have any additional questions, you can reach out to Anatoly at Anatoly Geyfman, Geyfman at h1.co. And we thank you for his presentation. I hope everyone has a good day.
Thank you, Elizabeth.